The Lord give you his peace. We're now on class 16, so we're really making our way through the life of St. Francis, but we're still stuck in the year 1212, or I should say 1210. And so I want to just talk about a couple of changes in the order. I want to continue from our last class and talk about capitular meetings or general chapters, provincial chapters. And so we're going to have to shoot ahead a little bit and then kind of put it in perspective. So the 13th canon, or the 13th rule that was given by the Fourth Lateran Council in the year 1215, expressly prescribed the holding of general chapters, which were to take place every 3 years for monastic abbots of a kingdom or canons regular and so forth. So St. Francis understood the necessity that every year or 3 years, all the friars should gather and discuss the life and how they're living it, how it's going and so forth, and elect superiors and everything else. So Francis decided on meeting twice a year at Pentecost and then at the Feast of St. Michael. And so because of the great number of friars, the meetings became less frequent. But he wanted the brothers to come together often as a fraternity. All the brothers. Eventually that had to be, put down to delegates because it was impossible for the friars to travel from all over the world to be part of this chapter. So by 1216, the friars were assembling once a year altogether. In 1221, the general chapter was the last which gathered all the friars professed and novices, ministers, and subjects. So 1221, rule number 18, Francis inserted that on the yearly feast of St. Michael, the provincials may have a chapter. So in other words, all the brothers come together once a year, but then each of the provinces, they get together in provincial chapters once a year as well. So if you're living in the territory of Paris, you guys all get together. If you're in England, well, you guys get together. If you're down this territory, you guys get together. So it was a way of trying to coordinate the brothers in a more peaceful, orderly manner. The general chapters gathered all the provincials and were to be held every 3 years. So eventually it changed because all the friars could not make it once a year to Assisi or to Italy. So they started having it once every 3 years as a way of being able to better manage things. Now, the divine office, fasting and sacraments. There were obligatory fasts. From All Saints to Christmas was a particular fast. Epiphany to Easter, of course, was another fast. And they were to eat what was set before them. Now, to qualify that, when you eat what's set before you, that's the good or the bad. Sometimes what's set before you is not so good. Sometimes what's set before you is delicious. So you eat what's set before you. If you're at someone's house, you're at an event, you're given something, you eat what's set before you. If you're at the table and the brother is cooking, you eat what is set before you. You may not get what you want, but you eat what's set before you because what you get is what the Lord's providing. So Francis wanted the friars to follow that gospel command to eat what's set before them. And Francis is one of the first founders of a religious order that did not ban the eating of meat. Francis said only on Fridays did they have to abstain from meat. Other than that, they can eat meat whenever. And so Francis never put that burden on the friars. They were allowed to eat meat whenever. Okay? There was no special rule on abstinence. They were to confess to a priest of the order, and when impossible, they would go to any priest. So that they were always to go to confession before communion. So we see Francis's emphasis on both the sacraments of the Mass and the sacrament of confession. Okay? All the friars were to attend the one Mass in each friary a day. Francis wanted one Mass in each friary and all the friars to attend that Mass. Even if a friar was going to celebrate his own personal Mass later, he was still to attend the communal Mass. Francis saw the Eucharist as the central hub of the Franciscan life, the central hub of the community. That is, through the Eucharist we truly become one with each other and with Christ. And so he wanted all the friars to be there, present at that Mass together. And so Francis wanted us worshiping through the holy sacrifice of the Mass in community together each day. Even if you had some other Mass you were going to celebrate somewhere else, you were still to attend the communal Mass. Now, there were some abuses that did creep up, of course. We have human nature. We have original sin. And so, people absenting themselves from the conventual life, the communal life. There was no appropriate term of formation, so guys entered, they made vows, so there was no formation program going on, which did cause difficulties later. Not having a local stability, being transferred all the time did pose its own problems. Friars traveling about without permission and so forth, going out to preach without permission, did become problematic. The friars were wandering about with no obedience. That's not good. You need to be sent. You just can't go on your own. So Pope Honorius III sent a letter to the provincials stating that, "Do not admit anyone to profession in your order unless he has been given a year of probation." And so that was an insistence on that year of novitiate before they entered the community. And we'll see that later with the Fourth Lateran Council. That the Fourth Lateran Council said you need a year of novitiate, and Pope Honorius III reinforced that because he didn't want any more of these abuses going on. So we'll come back to that a little bit later when we talk about those things. Let's look now at the rapid expansion of the order. Some 13th century authors have stated that as the effect of God's power, scarcely a village throughout the whole world is to be found untouched by their sacred presence. Scarcely a village throughout the whole world. So we see how fast the order grew and how rapidly it spread to almost every village throughout Christendom. Also, another 13th century author says, this order has spread throughout the whole world. Another says, they have in a short time so multiplied in number that there is hardly a province in Christendom where they do not have some friars. So the friars began to become the salt of the earth. They were assaulting the world, peppering the world, we should say. Okay? So some reasons for their growth. They preached effectively against heretics. It wasn't just what they were saying, it was how they were living. That the friars were truly living a life after the manner of the gospel, and that preached so effectively that it converted heretics. They saw in the friars this authentic witness of the gospel. Older orders failed because of an inordinate manner of life. The older orders were lax in their observance of penance, lax in austerities. They became luxurious in their living. There wasn't real poverty. And so people were disillusioned by the old orders becoming somewhat fat and relaxed. And then they saw these friars, and they were just amazed by them. You touch the screen here for a second. There we go. And they were so impressed by these friars living such a radical life. And it drew people to them. Now we also have a statement that the Lord wanted poor and simple men to save many souls before the end of the world. That was one of the reasons for their growth as well. That the Lord himself wanted the friars because he needed poor and simple men to proclaim the gospel before the second coming. Okay? Now, another reason why the order grew is because it was a completely new form of life, and that attracted the youth. They saw this new vivaciousness, this new way of living, and many young people were drawn to that because it spoke to their hearts. In 1220, now we're talking years after, Francis founded the order, 11 years after, in 1220, Cardinal Ugolino promoted the order, wishing to establish it throughout the whole world. So they had the cardinal, who was the prefect for religious, encouraging people to come and join the friars. And then they had the encouragement of the Pope himself. The Pope wanted men to join the friars because he saw how it was flourishing, how beautiful it was. Now, John of Vitry stated, spreading rapidly over the whole earth is that it imitates so designedly the life of the primitive church and in every way the life of the apostles. So John of Vitry says the reason why the order was expanding and growing is because it imitated the life of the primitive church. It imitated the life of the apostles. And that was by design. That's what Francis wanted. Francis wanted the friars to live after the manner of the apostles and to be a life of the early church. And this excited people to say, yes, that's what I want. Remember what I said in earlier classes, that prior to Francis, there was already that movement going on in the church. There was already this movement of those wanting to return to the early days of the church and that initial fire of the apostles. And the friars minor were living that, and that attracted many people to the community. Now, there was misgivings about the growth of the order. St. Francis himself feared that poverty would suffer if many entered the order. So Francis saw a danger with this fast and rapid growth. He wasn't willing to tell, to stop the growth, but he was very cautious of it. He would say this, he said, yes, it is true, as I told you, that the Lord would cause us to grow into a great people. But later on, it will be as men casts his nets into the sea or into a lake and catches a great number of fish. He then picks out the best, but the rest he throws overboard. The friars did not fail to recognize that in the course of the development, certain things will be unpalatable because of their bitterness. In other words, Francis is saying this is great, so many men are joining and so forth, but the day is going to come. It's going to be like when you throw out this throw out this net, you have this great catch of fish, and some fish you catch are throwaways. They can't be eaten. They're no good. And he's going to say this about the order, that there will be men who will enter the order and they won't have the charism deep within their heart. They'll make mitigations, they'll make relaxations, they'll relax poverty, mitigate poverty, they'll relax penance, mitigate penance, they'll relax the prayer life, mitigate the prayer life, and because it's just too bitter for them. They'll start relaxing the life, mitigating the life, not getting up for vigils, not praying at night, kind of sleeping in, needing to get all their rest and their beauty sleep, all this stuff, because the austerity and the penance of life was bitter. Francis will say they're like bad fish that need to be thrown away. And this has happened throughout the centuries, which is why we always see Franciscan reform movements taking place within the life of the church. That fidelity to the charism is necessary. You want to be a good fish? Be faithful to the charism, whether you be a first order, second order, or third order. Be faithful to the charism God has bestowed upon you. If you're not faithful, Francis considers you a bad fish that needs to be thrown back in the sea. We can be good fish, or we can be bad fish. That's a decision we make, whether or not we're going to be faithful and loyal to the charism and allow that bitterness to become sweet. Allow the life to convert us and change us, and not take the life and try to change it to our wants and desires, to our likes or dislikes. So the statistics here, let's throw this out there. They go from 1209 with 12 friars. By 1221, there was 3,000 friars. By 1223, there are 5,000 friars. That's rapid growth. From 1209 to 1223, from 12 to 5,000, that's an amazing growth the friars made in such a short period of time. All right, we're going to stop there for this class. I know it's a little short, but we're going to stop because in the next section, I'm going to start picking up with back to our chronology. We'll talk about Francis in the year 1212, Francis in the year 1213, and then we'll talk about the Fourth Lateran Council. So we'll be moving now back to the chronology. Just wanted to take that time in these last couple of classes to review how the order was growing and the change that was made, how the friars lived, and how we came to understand the beauty and the gift of the charism. So we'll catch up in the next class. Sorry this one was so short, but we'll pick up again with the life of Francis in our next class. May God bless you and Mary keep you.